guys, today I'm showing you how to make this adorable little keychain pouch. For this project, you're going to need 4 pieces of fabric that are 5-inch squares. I designed this pattern especially for pre-cut quilting fabric, and this is a charm pack. You're going to use 2 of these fabrics for the outer fabric and 2 for the liner. This pouch is not from this collection, but this is just showing you what a charm pack looks like if you're not familiar with them. For the outer fabric, I gave my bag a little bit more structure by attaching fusible interfacing to it. This is a weft interfacing because this is what I had on hand, but you can use any kind of fusible interfacing. And you're just going to attach this to the outer fabric before cutting. Other special tools you need are going to be a zipper foot so that you can attach the zipper, and actually a majority of the project is sewn using the zipper foot. You're also going to need an invisible zipper that's about 6 to 8 inches long. That is longer than the bag, but that's so that you can unzip it while sewing, and it makes it a little bit easier to attach. And then when we're done with it, you cut off the excess. My zipper is quite a bit longer, so if you have a longer zipper, you can certainly use it, but there will just be a little bit more waste with that. Then you're going to need this free printable template that you can find in my Ko-fi shop. The pattern is a free download and you'll just print it at home, and it fits on one piece of printer paper. The pattern also has a template for the hang tab, which is just a small piece of scrap fabric that you use to attach the keychain hardware. And the last thing you're going to need is some hardware of your choice. I'm using a jump ring and this little rotating lobster claw clamp. You can find packs of these on Amazon or wherever. So let's get started. You can start with the liner or the outer fabric, it doesn't matter, and just lay the template over top of your fabric. And I like to pin it to the fabric just so it stays in place. And then all you're going to do is cut out these notches. After you're done cutting, you're going to want to mark the top edge. I like to use fabric chalk, and this is just so you remember to sew the right side to the zipper, because there's a little bit more fabric down here than there is at the top. So the first thing we're going to do is attach the zipper to one side of the bag. The way I like to do this is to open it out, and then you're only working with one side of the zipper tape at a time. And then I'm going to take it and lay it face down along the zipper edge of one of the outer bag pieces. I like to leave a little bit of extra zipper tape on either side of the bag, and that way it's easier to sew the zipper in. So you're just going to line it up with the top, and then take a piece of your liner fabric, this is the zipper side, and you're going to lay it face down across that. Then you're just going to pin along that top edge and sew it on using a zipper foot. Every seam that we're sewing along the zipper, you want to make sure you start and stop a ½ inch from the end of the bag. And you're going to need to do this for sewing the zipper to the bag and doing the top stitching later on. And the reason you do that is so that you have extra fabric on the end that you can fold together to sew the ends of the bag. That's how that looks after sewing the zipper to the first side. And then we're going to open this out and set that aside for a minute. And now we're taking the other side of our outer fabric and laying that zipper side up. We're going to take the piece we just sewed and lay it face down on top of that so that this side of the zipper tape is along that top edge. So here's that zipper tape face down on the top edge. And then we're going to take the other piece of liner fabric, zipper side up, and lay this face down on top of that. And then we're going to pin and sew across here like we did on the other side. The only thing is that you're going to want to make sure your zipper ends are really nice and lined up at the end before you pin, because if it's off by a little bit, your zipper is not going to close all the way nicely. So here I have that pinned across the other edge. I've got my liner fabric face down, my zipper face down, and my outer fabric face up. And my ends of my zipper line up at the end. I forgot to mention before we sewed the other side of the bag that this is using a 1/4 inch seam allowance on all of our seams on the bag. And on a bag this small, you want to be super careful about your seam allowances being exact, because being off by even just a little bit can make it more difficult to line things up at the end. So here's that other side after sewing it. And now we're going to open these both out and press the fabric away from the zipper. And when you're pressing, you just want to make sure everything is really even across the whole seam. It's really easy to get your fabric pressed up too far like that, especially on the liner. And if you do that, things aren't going to line up in the corners. So just make sure that you're pressing it evenly away from the zipper. And a good way to tell if it's even is that the outer and the inner fabric will line up like that in that corner. Here I have my fabric pressed away from the zipper, and my corners line up here and here, so that's a good indicator that everything is laying properly. And then I'm just going to do some top stitching along this upper edge. And like the other seams we did on the zipper, we're stopping and starting 1/2 inch from the end, so we have these flaps loose, and then we can sew the ends of the bag later on. Now that we have the top stitching done on both sides, we're going to sew the bottoms of the bag together. For the liner, we're just going to sew a short section on either side here and leave the middle open, and that's so that we can turn the bag later on. On the outer fabric, we're going to sew all the way across the bottom. So I have those seams sewn on the bottoms, and I pressed them open. On the liner, I press it open all the way across so that there's a nice fold here, which makes it easier to sew the bottom together at the end. The next thing we're going to do is take the zipper and just make sure that the pull is inside the bag by a couple inches. You don't want it closed all the way because you won't be able to turn the bag later on if it is. And then we're going to sew the ends of the bag together. We're going to be sewing the liner and the outer fabric separately. For the liner, we're just stitching across here, including both flaps and the center portion, which is just a single layer of fabric. And then when we sew the outer, we're going to be sewing through the zipper tape. And then finally at the end, we're going to stitch through all the layers and attach the zipper tape to the liner with some nice stitching, and that'll keep it nice and secure. But before we do that, we're going to sew the tabs that go inside the bag. And if we don't do this now, it's really easy to forget. So you're going to take these tabs that you cut with the template, and you're going to fold them with the short ends meeting in the middle. You're then going to press that and fold it again and press again. Here's how those will look after pressing. I have it folded with the short ends touching in the middle, and then I folded that in half again and pressed. And we're just going to sew a very narrow stitch along both of these edges. And here's how those look after sewing them. And we're just going to set these aside for later. We're going to be using them when we sew the ends of the outer fabric. So when we're sewing the liner, I like to pin the zipper tape out of the way, and then we're just going to sew across this using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're sewing through these ends and then this single layer of fabric in the middle. And for this step, it's easiest to use a zipper foot so you can get nice and close. Now that we have the liner sewn, we can sew the outer fabric. This is very similar to sewing the liner, but we are going to be sewing through the zipper tape, and we also need to include our tabs. Because this is a keychain pouch, I like attaching a jump ring to this before sewing it into the bag, and that just makes it easier. And you're going to fold this in half, and this is going to go directly over the zipper between the 2 layers of outer fabric. And you're going to be sewing through all the layers except for the liner. So that's the zipper tape, the outer fabric, both layers of the tab, and the bottom of the bag. Just make sure you have the liner pinned out of the way because you don't want that sewn together all the way across, or you won't be able to stitch your corners later. So I have my liner pinned out of the way, and I have my layers all tucked together. I like using a quilting clip just to hold that center part together because there's a lot of layers there. So here's how that looks after sewing. The last thing we're going to do with the end is stitch the liner to this through all of the layers. And you're just going to be stitching only over the zipper tape. You don't want to sew all the way across or you won't be able to sew the corners. So just do a little bit of stitching right here and that will tack the layers together nicely. So here I just did some stitching over the end through all the layers, and that's only over the zipper tape. And then we can go ahead and cut off this zipper tape excess. And next we're going to sew the corners. So you can take the corner and fold it out like this. And then you're just going to sew across. And now repeat this on all of the corners. Here's how that looks after sewing. If you're having trouble getting your corners to line up perfectly, just try to get it as neat as possible and sew as close as you can to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If any of your seam allowances are off along the zipper, this is what can cause issues with the corners lining up. But as long as they're sewing through both layers, everything should be fine and you can still make the bag work just fine. Here's how that looks after sewing all of the corners. And then we're going to go ahead and turn the bag. And then we're going to take the liner and stitch this closed by hand using an invisible ladder stitch. And here's the cute little finished bag. If you're looking for more pouch sewing videos, I have this packing cube video and a video for sewing pencil cases as well. Thanks for watching.